Alright, it's time to do more sci-fi, fantasy, and weird exploration time with book reviews, kind of, not really, sort of. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm continuing my catch-up with works that I have read for projects but haven't yet reviewed. So these aren't traditional reviews, they're not super well researched, more explainy bits in the cards up above. I have a fair amount of titles to talk about, so I'm not going to do the explainy bit here, but these are all from my sci-fi, fantasy, and weird exploration, and they're all titles that I read last year, 2018. And my sci-fi, fantasy, and weird exploration is something that I started back in 2016 when I recognized that although I consider myself a lover of science fiction and fantasy, I wasn't reading a lot of them. So I wanted to do something to rectify that, so I made a big list and I've been reading my way through it, but I haven't always been reviewing my way through it, which is what I'm hoping to rectify with these videos. So in this video, we are going to be talking about A Canticle for Liebowitz, Howl's Moving Castle, and the entirety of the Chronicles of Narnia series. So yeah, let's get this party started. These just so happen to be the 3 titles, or like Narnia's 7 books, so it's actually 9 books that I read last year. That makes me feel better. I was like, I only read 2 books last year for this project, and I'm like, actually, 9 ain't so bad. 9 ain't so bad at all. And I did read all of Narnia last year. I reread the ones I had already read, and then continued on with the ones I hadn't read. So, but let's first get to the one-ofs, or the one, actually both of these are parts of series. So, spoiler ahead, Canticle for Liebowitz and Howl's Moving Castle are both for series that I won't be continuing. We're all allowed to like and not like the different things that we like and don't like. So first up, Canticle for Liebowitz. This is by Walter M. Miller Jr. It is the 23rd title I read for the sci-fi, fantasy, and weird exploration. It was published in 1960, and it is the first in the St. Liebowitz series. And I would say that this is... one of the questions I have is it the genre it says it is? And I was surprised at what genre this ended up being, because I thought it was science fiction. However, I would pretty much, this is actually post-apocalyptic. And I was like, what? Say what now? I don't know, and I actually don't know if, I guess you could say it's science fiction, but for me it really much read like post-apocalyptic. It is set on Earth, but in the future, after some catastrophic event. So that's post-apocalyptic, and which can be sci-fi or can be fantasy depending on the nature of the apocalypse, which I don't know if we find out in this book. This one I read in from August 2017 to February 2018. It took me a long time to get through. I ended up opting for the audiobook and burning through most of it over a weekend just to get it done. It actually was one of my unwrapped books, and I initially got it because I had started to participate or at least follow the Sword and Laser book club, and so that would have been some time in 2017 or earlier that this was their selection, so that was a long time ago. I ended up giving it a 7 out of 10, and looking back, that feels a bit generous, to be honest, for my opinion. This is one where it's challenging, because I'm not necessarily saying that it's not well written, just that I did not enjoy it. It was not what I expected. It was very religious-based, and all of the, and I found it heartbreaking. This one I don't think I'll be able to talk about without being spoilery, so I will leave timestamps down below if you want to swip if you don't want to hear spoilery things about this but want to connect to the other reviews in the video. So down below for that. So for this one, so I'm just going to get spoilery because I don't know how to not do that with this one. So future world, but it seems to be like in religious sects, and they're trying to hold on to things from the past that there aren't many of. And to me, it just felt heartbreaking because there was so much like time and attention spent to like duplicating like historical documents, what they considered historical documents, and they were like blueprints for something that no one can use anymore, and notes and about like, you know, a note someone would leave before they head out shopping. And to me, it just felt heartbreaking that they didn't like they were treating with reverence, treating really strongly, something that's horrible wording, like they were misunderstanding how important something was. And maybe they were trying to bring greater importance to things of the past because there aren't many things from the past. But I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's just so much shopping list. Like, it's not, yeah, it could be very reflective of the day, but it's not that important. And they didn't know. And that was heartbreaking to me. And like a lot of the book is more about particular religious leaders, all of which I thought were horrible, power hungry. They, I felt like nobody had any like rights, and it was just some of it was just chaos and desolation, and it's just like I didn't take anything from it, like anything at all. So this one really didn't sit well with me. And I think if I had known going in that it was a post-apocalyptic story that had a religious bent to it, that would have been helpful, but it also would have let me probably know it's not a title for me. Neither of those things are something like religious thrillers or not, because often they can be cautionary tales. Doesn't sit well with me. I don't, post-apocalyptic is often challenging, especially when it comes to gender dynamics. I don't even remember if there was any women in this. Probably not. Or probably not well. Oh, maybe there was, but not well. I don't even know. So it was not a good fit. It was not a good fit. Let's just leave it at that. Let's move on to something else. Next, we have Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. This is the 24th title that I read for the Sci-Fi Fantasy and Weird Exploration. It was published in 1986, and it is the first in the Howl's Moving Castle series. I did not know it was a series going into it. I pretty much knew it because it is also a Studio Ghibli film, so that is what I knew of it, and I would definitely put this in the land of the genre of fantasy or YA kids. I don't know if it's YA or kids, one or the other, and definitely fantasy. This has like more like magic, castles, more magic. And I read this back in March of 2015, and I gave it 7.5 stars. This one I had some challenges with. I really thought I would really enjoy it, but some of the things I found a bit challenging. It follows a girl who ends up being, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, and I don't want to get spoilery, but she ends up sort of working in this moving castle, which is a cool idea. I actually quite liked the castle, and I loved the oh my gosh, what's that called? The fireplace. The fireplace was my favorite part of the whole story. But I felt like the main character, I felt like there were some challenges. There was some harshness like thrown on her, which sucked, and how she took it, I wasn't like was actually I think was okay, but it was just like why did that have to happen to her? Like we felt very unjust. And then I actually don't even really remember this that well, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. Mostly, I got it out of the library because it was available, just like, hey, I'm going to read that. I thought I would love it, didn't love it, didn't hate it. I felt like there were some things that I felt were a bit questionable, and in terms of feeling like, that's not how I love seeing gender dynamics played out or witches presented. But I would have to reread it or read it intensely and think about it, to think if it was or it wasn't. So, and I didn't enjoy it enough to feel like I wanted to do that. So that was a bit of a disappointment. It wasn't really what I was expecting, although I did not have that many expectations going in. It was a pretty fast read, and I definitely understood it, so, pro there. So yeah, so I don't have too much of a strong impression on this one. So far, I would actually say a lot of the kids' books that I have read have been misses, and this was somewhere in between. Like it didn't have a huge impact one way or the other. So if you love this story, I would love to hear what it is about it that you love about it, and if I should try any other titles by Diana Wynne Jones, because I did enjoy the writing. Like that was good, and it was engaging. I didn't love the content that much. But I love the fireplace. Love the fireplace. Next, let's go on to the Chronicles of Narnia. I read the entire thing last year, and now I'm looking at the time and wondering if I should do a separate video. I'm not going to because I don't have huge thoughts on this. So This was the 25th title that I read for the Sci-Fi Fantasy and Weird Exploration. The books came out between 1950 and 1956. They are definitely fantasy, and oh, Portal Worlds! Definitely Portal Worlds. And I read this between January and July 2018. Overall, I gave the series 7.2 out of 10. Let's go through the different titles. First up, we have The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It came out in 1950, and I gave it 7.5. And it was a reread a few times. Then we have Prince Caspian, came out in 1951. I gave it a 7. We have The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which came out in 1951 as well, and I gave it an 8. I guess I like that one. Then we have The Silver Chair, which came out in 1953, which I gave 7.5 to. Then we have The Horse and His Boy, which came out in 1954, and I gave 5.5. My least favorite. I had lots of issues with this. I think I talked about them throughout my Friday reads last year. It would have been in May. Yeah. And then we have The Magician's Nephew from 1955, which I gave a 7 to. I think this is also the first in the sort of internal chronology order, so you can start with this one, but I read them in publication order. And then last up, we have The Last Battle, which came out in 1956, and I gave 8 to. And I think I gave it 8 in part because it was the last title. I don't know, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if I enjoyed it versus The Voyage of the Dawn Treader the better. I think The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, it has a strong adventurous spirit, and they're on a boat, and it has Reepicheep, and there was lots of goodness in that one that I really enjoyed. But yeah, so I have quite a history with this one, with these series. I started reading them when I was a kid, and I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I quite enjoyed it up till quite near the end, so spoilers for the end of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, although it's very well known. The series is very well known for the thing that I'm going to say next. I did not realize when I was reading it that it had religious allegory in it, that it was presenting a religious point of view and messaging. And when I figured that out, I threw the book across the room. I was so mad. I felt tricked. I felt betrayed. There was this big, adventurous, wonderful fantasy world. I did not want to be given a message or a religious message. And so that really threw me off the series. And I eventually reread The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when I was an adult, and I healed some of that a little bit. And then I started reading the books as the films came out, but they only came out with them until The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And I did enjoy the films, especially the first one. Oh my gosh, it is such a magical world, and there's lots of snow, and I love the fun, and I love the characters, and and that it's siblings. My goodness gracious, I'm part of a large sibling set, a sibling set. To 5. So there were lots of things that really resonated with me in terms of the siblings and all of the stuff. And so I was really happy that they came out with the films, but now it's been many years and it doesn't look like they're going to do the rest of the films. So I think we just now have the books. Of course they might, because it's classic, and it is classic fantasy. There's magic and has a strong, of course, good versus evil type. Does it? I'm not sure. Now that I think about that, I'm not sure. I don't know if each story has a big adversary. Some of them are much more adventurously spirited. They have lots of interesting stories. I was surprised. I quite liked The Silver Chair. It had a very different tone to it, but it does feel weird that at some point the series starts to follow different characters. I wasn't anticipating that, which I should have, because from the films, the characters start to you don't see all of them as much. It's like the light is shining. It's like so that's an interesting that it happened, like that the characters and the character dynamics change as the series go on. But for me, I did have a lot of problems with The Horse and His Boy in terms of, like, I felt like there's a girl character in this that is totally as much, if not more, of a protagonist than the boy, so why is it called The Horse and His Boy? And I also felt like there was lots of stuff in this one that felt very uncomfortable in terms of, like, not being at choice and being married off and all of this stuff. And I was like, where did this stuff come from? I didn't feel present in any of the other stories, so that was a big no. There was lots of menace in the Magician's Nephew, but I actually thought it was pretty good. And then, of course, the last battle sort of brings it all together. So, yeah, so I am really happy that I finally finished this series and healed a bit of that wound of my young, like, what happened to me, like, reading it when I was young and just not knowing. And I do struggle with that generally because I don't like to know too much. Even now, I don't like to know too much about a story before going in. But the disappointment when it's something that you would have known isn't a good fit, or just feeling like I really felt sidelined on that. Like I really felt tricked. I felt tricked. And that's one of the where the hurt comes from, is that I believed you. I believed in you, book. And I was like, "Oh, you're just trying to tell me something that I should do. It's just the moral of the story." And I think although thematic, like there are religious themes throughout the story, I feel like it is more than that, and it doesn't. Although it's present when you know it's there, and for a lot of people that's great. This is their belief system. They like this is a wonderful way to embrace it and see it in a new light. But if it's not, or if you have challenges with it, then it's kind of like maybe that's not what I think, or whatever. So it gets complicated. So I'm glad that I read it. It was really great to finish a series too. I didn't finish that many series last year, so that was a big win. And it makes me feel better now thinking about, instead of reading 2 books last year, I actually read 9 books for the those books exploration. And yeah, and this video might get me, depending on what order these go up in, might actually get me caught up. Woohoo! Thank you for coming along the journey with these very loosely book review things. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned. I know it's a bit of a weird mix, and I would love to hear your thoughts on how much you want to know about a book going in. Is knowing 2 of these had religious themes, and that was the part of why I didn't like them. So maybe I need to research that a bit more. But it's so easy to get into spoilers accidentally. It is a challenge. It is a challenge, but more books in and more books in the future. And yeah, so that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching.